One. Good evening, YouTube. Today is March 14th, 2018, and today I have the opportunity to interview Tyler Boscolo. It's pronounced, is it Boscolo?
Boscolo, yeah, either
Boscolo?
works. Either works.
Cool. And him and I met at a recent blockchain meetup here in Seattle, and he is the COO of LifeID. So today, I'd like to give the audience some education and awareness on what LifeID is doing and how they relate to identity management. So with that said, why don't we just jump straight into it? Can you give us a quick rundown of what is LifeID, how the team formed, how did they come into existence? And then also, I think one interesting aspect is, from what I understand, LifeID, the ICO, or at least the token, was launched on the Dragonchain. And so if that is true, if we could just get any sort of insight into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just first of all, thanks for letting me join and get an opportunity to chat a little bit about kind of who we are and what we're doing. So yeah, I handle a lot of the business operations stuff at the company. It was founded about a little over a year ago, about a year and 2 months or so ago, by a gentleman named Chris. And so he's our CEO, he's our founder. He's got a super immense sort of technical background. He's been doing cryptography-based security for about 20 years now, building firewall technology, VPN stuff. And he really knows this firsthand. And so basically what was the germ of the idea for LifeID, if you will, was he was going on a trip to Europe. And he only wanted to take a smartphone with him. So he said, I want to take all of the cards out of my wallet. I don't want to have to carry all this crap with me. But how can I actually get a lot of these things that I use on a day-to-day basis for identification, for payments, so on and so forth, onto apps within my smartphone? And so that was, part A of the problem. And then he said he was actually, I want to say he was on the plane back from that same trip when he read the Ethereum white paper, and his mind was sort of blown from this, this creation of the smart contracts that has the capability to do. And so that was really where the two of those, those two aspects put together was how the idea for LifeID was formed. So at a kind of a 500-foot view, what LifeID is we're a open permissionless blockchain identity system or platform, really. And it's built up of a system of smart contracts. So what we're really trying to pioneer, or at least perpetuate, which this is not a new term, but we're trying to do a lot of cool things in the space, is this thing that's referred to as self-sovereign identity, which for the audience, really what that concept is you as a user actually own your data, you own your identity, compared to the current world where, all of your personal information is stored on Google servers, on Facebook servers, and you have to use those credentials to sort of authenticate yourself throughout the world. So the impetus of the idea is that we really wanted to be able to create a super easy experience for people to transact their identity anywhere, and do so in a very private way where the user actually gets to kind of maintain their data and all that important stuff. So that's kind of the 500-foot view of LifeID, how it got started. So we have not done an ICO. We haven't done a token sale. Essentially, just to give you kind of a quick spiel on the Dragonchain thing, we've known the folks over there for quite some time. We were initially planning on doing a pre-sale through them, but given just sort of the state of the economy and how things are looking with pre-sales and everything else, basically the feedback that our attorneys gave was that until the platform is finished and completely launched, anything that you sell up until that point, this is the feedback from our attorneys, and I'm not giving legal advice, I'm not an attorney, but this is at least what they told us, was that you could run the risk of it being a security. So our token will be a utility when the platform launches, but until that point, unfortunately, we have to be a little bit careful. And so the Dragonchain ethos, if you will, is they don't want to have to restrict anybody from being able to gain access to it, which we totally understand. And so we didn't actually end up doing that through the Dragonchain platform. But at the end of the day, the LifeID brand promise is that we want to live everywhere. So any smart contract capable blockchain will have an instance of LifeID. We're pioneering, or at least we're prototyping a lot of this on the Ethereum network, given that's kind of the only real game in town right now for smart contract capabilities. But at the end of the day, if your identity needs to be transacted somewhere, we have to have an instance of our platform on any smart contract capable blockchain. So that's where we're at right now.
Cool. So, kind of a couple of follow-on questions. So, like you, I am also not a financial advisor of any sort, but yeah, I've been keeping up with the whole debate about, how do we categorize, we meaning the SEC, how do we categorize these tokens, security, utility, and whatnot. So going back to that, is LifeID eventually planning on doing some sort of crowdfunding, or have they not determined this yet?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the short answer is yes. And one of the core pillars of our identity platform, and we actually have an article out there on our website, lifeid.io, and our Medium page associated with it. And one of the things that we talk about, or at least an article we've written, there's 3 pillars that we think are fundamental for a user-driven identity platform. So one of the big differentiators between us and some of the other competitors out there is that the platform is not owned by anyone. It's owned by token holders. And so there's governance that helps sort of dictate how the platform's, built and runs. And for us to allow that to happen, we have to have a large or sort of a wide disbursement of tokens.
Sure.
So there's absolutely a plan to get the tokens out to as many people as we can, so that they can, use the platform, have partners on the platform, people who are sort of validating people's identity, people who are accepting, companies that are accepting identity. So, absolutely, we need to get these things in everybody's hand that we can. And the mechanics of that will most likely be or will be a token sale at some point when the platform's finished. So that's the kind of the current plan right now.
Cool. And I read, I think, an older blog post on your guys' website, and the use case that I read about was basically, this is one use case. Imagine, Equifax, something like Equifax, but you have it on a blockchain. So suddenly this means things are inherently more secure. People have direct ownership of their identity data. And I read that the Equifax breach had to do with basically just poor password practices. Like literally the username was admin, the password was admin, I think, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Oh,
and that's what caused that. And just in cryptography, that sort of security is enforced at such a higher level that the way I understood it is something like LifeID, in theory, would one, prevent any sort of breach like that from happening in a practical sense, and then two, you wouldn't have a middle person such as Equifax essentially profiteering off of your data and probably also charging you for any services they provide. You as the token holder would have those rights to yourself.
100%. So that's a really great instance. And the Equifax breach, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that our current identity model truly is broken. And so the way it works right now, and I alluded to this a little bit with the Facebook or the Google example, is that all of the data that, they have on us is stored in a centralized server. So it's a very, targeted point for hackers to try to go in and gain access to all that data. In our world, we leverage, there's a few different components to how we think about data and how we try to, limit the exposure. And so the first aspect is that, and this is really important to understand, there's not actually data that is stored anywhere on the blockchain. So there's a few components that actually allow for this to work. There's one called a DID, which is a decentralized identifier. And essentially, in sort of a layman's term explanation, you have a unique DID for every transaction that you have. So for example, with Apple as a website, or with, your building that you have access with, these would all be represented as DIDs. And so that's part of the equation. The other thing that we do, this is really crucial for limiting actual data transaction and exposure, is by leveraging something called a verified claim. And so what a verified claim is you can think about it as a check mark of sorts. So for example, if I want to go and, let's just say I want to go to a bar or lease an apartment of some sort, they need to know that I'm of a certain age to be able to do that. And for example, I could have Washington State, which is where we're from, have them give a attestation that I am over whatever age, let's just say 18, for the fact of leasing an apartment. And so they can cryptographically sign, and as long as the leasing apartment they're comfortable with Washington State sort of verifying that component of my identity, I don't actually ever have to show them that my birth date is, January 1st, 1990 or whatever it may be. And so, when you start pairing a bunch of these different components together, you don't have to worry about data residing on a centralized server because, the data that would be held in this case would be encrypted on a user's phone. So just to give you an example of how we're trying to build a solution on top of our platform is there'd be a LifeID app where a lot of that information could be stored encrypted, and you would use some sort of biometric like a thumbprint or like a Face ID to be able to actually access it. So we want to be able to have, we call it good security hygiene, to be able to do as much of that as we can to limit how much data people are sharing, and in the manner that they share it as well. So
that makes sense. And I think that you touched on a good point on how practically we could envision essentially encrypting your identity. And one of the things I was going to ask is would it be potentially let's say that if I want to create my public and private key, my public key, let's say in theory might be my first and last name. And then my private key, when I create it, would maybe be like a combination of like my biometric picture and my thumbprint. And now I have like a something to like create a private key and also validate it when I want to access my identity. And I think it sounds like you touched on that.
Yeah. So we understand in one of the use cases, or just like in kind of a real world example, right? So think about organizations. If you want to be able to transact with an organization that's sort of leveraging our platform, that information, you need to be able to find it in some capacity. So you're right in that regard of trying to have some information that could be public, that people can go out and find, as that is important in certain use cases where you'd actually need to go out and find that information. So
sure. And then and since we're chatting about, I guess, more of the practical potential solutions or whatever that process might look like, it sounded like you guys were or are working with Dragonchain, but it also sounds like you're doing some kind of prototyping or testing on the Ethereum blockchain. Is the testing and prototyping going to currently be on the Ethereum blockchain with the intention to ultimately move over to Dragonchain, or is the idea of Dragonchain and kind of incubating yourselves on that blockchain no longer in the near term?
That's a really good question. So what Dragonchain has is they have a hybrid system that essentially allows, there's smart contracts on it, and essentially allows businesses to implement different levels, whether they want to just go straight to the public Ethereum blockchain or more of a sort of permissioned ledger in some capacity. So the LifeID platform, and it's really important that we are not building our own blockchain. It's a system of smart contracts that will live on a public permissionless blockchain. So the current solution to that would be Ethereum, but there'll be an instance of it that'll exist on all smart contract capable blockchains, and Dragonchain is absolutely one of those smart contract capable blockchains. It's really important to understand that one of the biggest challenges for building an identity platform is having scalability. So right now, as you're aware, Ethereum has a lot of problems with, this scaling problem. And so right now there's another local blockchain company called Archain, who they're trying to address that problem and fix it with some interesting things called row calculus that they're implementing. And also they should be one of the first people to come out with proof of stake, which they're working with Vlad Samger on Casper, or with the Casper implementation. So I don't know if they will be the first, but they could be one of the first. So it's super exciting that, just within the Seattle ecosystem, there's so many, great potential for places that we can live on and that we could possibly scale to, Visa level transactions, which, is 40,000 a second. And for an identity platform to be successful, we need to be able to have that type of infrastructure capability. So, we're right now really open to where that is going to eventually land. But right now, the main sort of platform will exist on Ethereum until we have a more viable solution that can offer the scalability we need.
Got it. So I think, my personal opinion, I think, is having a solution that's blockchain agnostic. That's great. And it seems like essentially at the moment, LifeID is very much intending to be blockchain agnostic so that it can be applied to whatever blockchain needs to be supported at the time or is available.
Exactly. And that's totally right. And the interoperability component for identity is absolutely crucial. So, you can't, if you have some sort of transaction that has to occur on another blockchain where, your main identity doesn't exist, it just falls flat, and it won't scale to the, really creating a global identity platform that we want to build. And so, we think about it a lot, is protocol standards that have been developed within the internet. So like TCP or other types of internet protocols, or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, some of these standards, we eventually want the LifeID protocol to be a standard for identity transactions, much like, the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi example. So we want everybody to be able to adopt it. We want it to be able to live everywhere. So that's kind of the big grandiose vision as well that is really, really critical for us to be able to be successful in the space.
Cool. That makes sense. And I know, you guys are still trying to work through the prototyping and testing. Is there any sort of publicly available repository? So basically like a GitHub that people can see, or and if not, is there any sort of, I don't know, long-term plan of making that available?
Absolutely. So 100%, everything that we build is going to be open source. So we think that that's a really important part for being able to gain the network effect that we need. So basically what we're planning right now is we're really aiming for an end of year platform launch. That's really the aggressive goal. It is certainly aggressive. I won't say it isn't, but that's the plan as of now. And we will absolutely be making everything open source and available, as we continue pushing to our GitHub repo, and we'll let people, go in there and make sure that everything's up to snuff. We've got a really great tech team who's working on it. So our CTO, as you may be aware, he was the CTO of StormX previously. So he did their very successful ICO. So he's a super, super, super smart guy in the space. He brings a lot of value to the team on at least, on a lot of the technical components, especially within the smart contract development. But absolutely everything is going to be open source, so people can go through and audit it, and they can begin to implement it as well within their own stacks as they see to it. So
cool. And then I assume the answer might be similar for this, but as far as like a roadmap goes, is there some sort of publicly available roadmap that people can access? I checked the website. I wasn't able to find one. And then if there isn't, are we thinking that maybe a roadmap might be released closer to the time where you come close to a go live date for the initial platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do have we do have an internal roadmap that we're working off of. We do plan on publishing our white paper here, ideally next week. That's the goal. We've been working on it for 8 months or something like that, and it's gone through countless amounts of revisions. And so you'll see a lot of those components in the white paper. But we will be posting more roadmaps associated to it, so people can stay up to date on, how we're sort of hitting our deliverables and the things that we need to be building into the platform as we go along. So we have a couple proof of concepts that, we want to plan to have done before the actual platform is going to go live. And so we're going to be releasing that along the way and giving people updates. So it's coming soon. That's kind of the short answer. Ideally next week is when we're going to have the white paper and a few other details out, including the roadmap.
Cool. And then I just have like 2 or 3 questions left. So the next one is, I work in software, and I know that if you're working on anything that's like really like on the leading edge of things, it's hard to plan super far in advance. Right. Because things are changing so rapidly. So do you have a vision of what, like, let's say the next 1 to 3 years looks like? I know that within a year, try to get an initial platform rolled out, and then I guess what would be the next major milestone after that?
Absolutely. So the way that we think about it is there's a couple components that are super crucial. So absolutely getting the platform out and live and having people, actually be able to use it is super important. With that, we'll have our own app, which is really essentially a wallet that you can use the platform or gain access to it. And so the other third component that I think is going to be, this is sort of the 5-year, 10-year ongoing plan, is we want this to be a truly decentralized open platform for people. And I know a lot of people just say that it's kind of a hot buzzword, but we genuinely mean it. And so, the next few years for us is going to be getting as many ecosystem partners on board, whether that's companies in different verticals who are, helping build some of the code. So maybe like a web authentication company helping build, OpenID Connect bridges. We have some of those that we've done already, but being able to implement them within their own, within their own customer base. So we see that we want to be able to bring on other partners who are going to be able to implement the technology and help really grow that network effect, because as I'm sure you and your viewers are well aware, to really create a successful platform, you have to have, Metcalfe's law and a great network effect. So, the way that we see it is once it goes live, there's going to be some governance and voting and whatnot that will be in play on the platform. And then we're also going to be, trying to get as many people on board and really perpetuating that kind of narrative of having a decentralized self-sovereign identity platform.
Cool. Makes sense. And it's my last question. So the main place I know for staying up to date is just LifeID.io. Do you have, for the viewers, whether they just want to keep track or keep an eye on any developments on the project, or maybe they might be interested in working for LifeID if that is an opportunity, like what are the best ways they can subscribe or, bookmark and just stay up to date on those types of topics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the best place to get kind of the constant feed of data is in two places. One would be our Twitter. So our Twitter handle is lifeid_io. Or the other best place would be our Discord channel. So I'm in it fairly frequently. I haven't been in it as much just due to the traveling and all that other good stuff. But we have other members of our team. We have our CMO, our CEO, and a couple other the developers in there who can answer questions. If there's anything pertinent to, if you want to be a proof of concept or a pilot customer, we can talk about all that kind of stuff. And so Discord's probably the best medium to actually have that conversation. And absolutely, we are hiring right now. We want to be able to hire on as many developers as possible. We're super excited. We just recently got a seed investment from Pythia, which is the VC arm of our chain. So that's now public information that we're super excited to share. And actually, we announced it at the event that we met at a week or so ago. So that's certainly helping a lot within our sort of our development, adding to the resources. We can pay people now, which is super exciting. So yeah, that's the plan. So if you guys, right now, the biggest need is on the development side. So if you are a developer, then, feel free to reach out, send us your resume. We are actively hiring, and we've got probably 8 or 9 more slots to fill. So we'd be super grateful for anybody who's interested in the project and wants to sort of lend a helping hand.
That is awesome, man. That's good to know. I'm sure the viewers would appreciate the information.
Super exciting.
Yeah, that's basically all my questions. Did you have anything else you wanted to get out before we wrap this interview up?
No, I thought this was phenomenal. Thank you again for just taking the time. I'm really glad that this is a kind of a hot topic. I mean, right now I'm actually at South by Southwest, as we mentioned a little bit ago, and blockchain is just so popular right now. And to my surprise, I mean, as your viewers are probably aware, there's a lot of people in the identity space. Like, there's a lot of people trying to solve the problem with tons of different solutions. And so it was sort of reassuring that arguably the number one topic that people were speaking about was identity, and how blockchain is such a great application to really solve a lot of those problems. And we haven't cracked the code to everything yet, but we're working really hard to do that. And there's great working groups and, a lot of companies trying to put their heads together and solve the problem. So I know that we're in a really early stage, and it may seem like there's a lot of competition, but I think there's a lot of blue ocean out there. And so it's really reassuring that there's so many people who are interested in this. So I thought that's probably my going out piece. But yeah, I think it's just, blue skies ahead, and it should be a lot of fun.
Awesome, man. I'm excited to see what happens.
Likewise.
Anyways, appreciate your time, and thanks for doing this interview.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and really appreciate it. We'll have to be in touch again soon.
We certainly will. You have a good night.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye.